Scouts Australia respectfully acknowledges the traditional custodians of the country throughout Australia where our activities take place today. We pay our respects to elders both past, present and emerging, and continue to recognise and embrace the important continuous history and connection to land and community of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders people.
Hi everyone, my name's Laura. I'm a Rover Scout from First Avenue Sea Scouts and I'll be your host tonight. I'm so stoked to have you here as we celebrate the United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organisation's annual World Day for Glaciers as part of the International Year of Glacier Preservation. Tonight we have something really special lined up. We'll speak to Scouts ambassadors and polar explorers Dr. Gareth Andrews and Dr. Richard Stephenson. You may remember them from their 66-day unsupported ski journey from the edge of Berkner Island to the South Pole. They're going to share some incredible insights on how glaciers around the world are connected, how they impact global water resources, and of course give us a peek into their epic polar adventures. Then we'll be joined by Oliver from First Cherrybrook Scout Group, and he was fortunate enough to be funded through the Dick and Pip Smith Leadership Through Adventure Fund. He'll be giving us a sneak peek into his upcoming trip to Patagonia in 2026. Because Scouts are all about taking action, we'll also hear from Patrick and Callista from the SDG team on how we can contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals by creating our own challenges to protect our planet. If you have a question for any of our guests tonight, don't forget to drop it in the comments and we'll try to get to as many as we can at the end of our presentations. So let's get started. Firstly, I'd like to introduce Dr. Gareth Andrews and Dr. Richard Stephenson to talk to us about glaciers.
Hi, everyone. Look, both Rich and I are really excited to be here today. It's a huge day for glaciers worldwide, and also Happy Harmony Day to everyone. Look, this year's initiative by the United Nations is dedicated to raising awareness about glaciers. Rich and I, over the years, have been so privileged to be able to travel to many glaciers on many continents, and we want to share some of those experiences with you today. Rich and I, one thing we'd both like to say at the start of this presentation is that growing up, Rich and I were Scouts. We're hugely proud of what we've achieved through Scouting, and it's really given us the foundations to go forward and go into these wild areas. So just the mateship and the camaraderie, the leadership skills, the independence that we have gained through Scouting has just been tremendous. So, and look, we're also extremely proud to be Scouts ambassadors, and over the last few years, we've done some wonderful things with Scout groups all over the country. If we could move forward through the slides, that would be great. So there's Rich and I in Antarctica. And just a few things with Scouts around the country. And so glaciers are so incredibly important for so many parts of our lives and for lives of people all over the world. So they're vital for freshwater supply, climate regulation, and biodiversity. The threat of global warming means that glaciers across the world are disappearing at alarming rates, and this threatens both ecosystems and the communities and the people that live around them and rely on them. The goal of the International Year of Glacier Preservation from the UN is to educate, take action and influence policies that can slow down glacier loss. As Scouts ambassadors, Rich and I have stepped up and joined the call to action, and we would love you to as well, and that's one of the reasons why we're talking to you tonight. We really want to empower you to understand glaciers, to work to protect them and to become advocates for their survival. We're going to show you a short video on glaciers, and then we'll talk a little bit more about them.
In a world that is experiencing the first impacts of climate change, one of the most significant transformations is occurring in the cryosphere. Glaciers, once emblematic symbols of snow's timeless accumulation, are now disappearing at an unprecedented rate, leaving a profound impact on our environment and communities.
So I just want you to think now about what comes to mind when you think of glaciers. Many of you who are listening will have visited glaciers. Probably some of you will have climbed them. And they are remarkable things, and they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes. You get alpine glaciers that cascade down through mountains in these huge rivers of ice. And you get continental glaciers that essentially sit on top of continents. The biggest is Antarctica, and then there's the Greenland ice sheet that sit in these huge domes across whole continents. And they move incredibly slowly, often out towards the sea. And in doing so, they create valleys, and they really carve the topography of the land underneath them. They're formed primarily as snow falls high on the mountains or high on a continent. And as this snow is compressed under the weight of more falling snow, they cascade out and form these huge rivers of ice. And glaciers are found on every continent on Earth apart from Australia. But that doesn't mean they're not important for our way of life here. They influence the whole planet through their actions, especially through fresh water sources and their impact on global weather. So us working to conserve them here is also incredibly important. Not only are they so important for the ecosystems and the natural world around them, but also the communities and the people that rely on them for their way of life. So we're spending time, for example, in Greenland. The Inuit communities that live around the coast of Greenland will rely on glaciers and sea ice for hunting and fishing, and being able to travel and communicate between isolated communities around the coast. Now time for another short video.
Glaciers have been shaping our world for millions of years. But as climate change warms the planet, glaciers are disappearing, not only altering the landscapes they leave behind, but changing our oceans, weather, and life on Earth as we know it. A glacier is a huge mass of ice that moves slowly over land. Glaciers can be classified into two general groups: alpine glaciers and ice sheets. Alpine glaciers form on mountainsides and move downward through valleys. Sometimes they create valleys by pushing dirt, soil, and other materials out of their way. These glaciers are found on every continent except Australia. Ice sheets, unlike alpine glaciers, are not limited to mountainous areas. They form broad domes and spread out from their centers in all directions. As ice sheets spread, they cover everything around them with a thick blanket of ice, including valleys, plains, and even entire mountains. The largest ice sheets are called continental glaciers. They cover vast areas, including most of Antarctica and the island of Greenland.
So Rich and I have had the opportunity to visit glaciers all over the world, and climbing and skiing on glaciers is an incredible experience. And like I mentioned before, it's really our time in Scouts that gave us the foundations to be able to go into these areas safely. They're beautiful, but they're also very dangerous. They're full of huge crevasses, huge holes that you can fall into. There's avalanche risk being in the mountains. And you need to be well trained, and you need to be fit and have the right gear. And so we're just going to run through a couple of places where we've had the chance to visit these glaciers. So out on the sea ice, not so much glaciers, but certainly sea ice. That's very important for our planet in itself. and then to Greenland. And you can see in this photo some of these incredible rivers that form on the Greenland ice sheet, and these crevasses that form on the ice sheet. And then to Iceland, where we skied across the Vatnajökull Glacier en route to the source of the Skjálfandaflót River, which we paddled down to the sea. And then to Svalbard, trying to stay out of the way of all the polar bears up there, but an incredible group of islands up near the North Pole. And then on to Antarctica. And in Antarctica, there's a place called Union Glacier, which every year they build a runway for the aeroplanes that fly in, which is just remarkable. And then through unsupported expedition to the South Pole, we experienced the continental glacier of Antarctica in all its glory.
Now, as Gareth mentioned earlier, glaciers aren't just these incredibly wild, beautiful features of the mountains and the polar regions of the world. They're environmental features of global importance. They provide a huge amount of the world's population's fresh water. The glacier melt that happens all year round, that preserves the snows of winter high in the Himalayan mountains, means that there are these reservoirs of fresh water stored in the ice that then melt out during the summer and feed mighty rivers like the Ganges and the Brahmaputra in India, and huge components of Asia have their fresh water supplies from the mountain glaciers of the Himalayas. And it's very similar in other parts of the world as well. You can see on this map here, as Gareth mentioned earlier on, Australia is the only continent that doesn't have glaciers. But of course, if you include where I live in New Zealand, we have plenty of glaciers over the other side of the Tasman. So they're very widespread throughout the world in those mountain chains, and of course the mighty polar ice caps of Antarctica and Greenland. And the vast majority of the world's ice sheet, of the world's fresh water, is tied up in those ice sheets, particularly the Antarctic and the Greenland ice sheet, but also in those mountain glaciers around the world. And of course, that's going to have global implications as those glaciers retreat. And I think we've got another wee short video to show you about the melting of those glaciers.
High up in the mountains and at the polar edges of our planet, glaciers have stood for millennia as silent sentinels of time. These colossal ice masses are more than just frozen water. They are intricate archives of Earth's climatic history and vital components of our planet's ecosystem. However, the serene beauty of these glaciers is under threat. They are melting at an unprecedented rate, and this phenomenon carries profound implications for our world. The primary driver of glacier melting is climate change, a result of human activities that increase greenhouse gas emissions. Burning fossil fuels for energy, deforestation, and industrial processes release carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. These gases trap heat, leading to global warming. Over the past century, the average global temperature has risen by approximately 1 degree Celsius. While this might not seem significant, even small temperature increases can have devastating effects on glaciers. Warmer air and ocean temperatures lead to accelerated melting and reduced snowfall, which diminishes glaciers' ability to replenish themselves. Additionally, pollutants like soot and black carbon, often from burning biomass and fossil fuels, settle on glacier surfaces. These dark particles absorb more sunlight and heat, speeding up the melting process. The impacts of melting glaciers are far-reaching. One of the most immediate consequences is rising sea levels. As glaciers melt, the water flows into the oceans, contributing to sea level rise. Scientists predict that by the end of the 21st century, half of the world's glaciers could be gone, causing sea levels to rise significantly. This poses a significant threat to coastal communities, increasing the risk of flooding, erosion, and habitat loss.
And as they said in the video, the impact of melting glaciers around the world, and particularly those melting polar ice caps, is not just confined to the people who live in those direct regions. It's a global phenomena. The consequences of sea level rise are going to be felt around the world, and particularly in Oceania, in the Pacific Islands, and in Australia as well. The vast majority of the world's population lives around the coast, and that's no less true anywhere than Australia. Australia, 22 million of the 27 million people who live in Australia live in the coast, around the coast, and almost every Australian will be impacted as these sea levels rise. It will inundate and flood coastal communities, cause significant damage, and as we're already seeing in Australia over the last few years, the global impact of increase in severe weather, be it either drought or floods and cyclones, is felt very strongly in Australia. And all of this is related to that global impact of climate change and the disruption of glaciers, ice caps, and the wider climate. Part of the reason, I mean, Gareth and I love traveling to these beautiful, wild, remote polar or mountainous regions because they're such incredible environments. But we're incredibly aware of the impact that climate change is having on these environments, how delicate they are. And we have always felt a duty to try and do our bit. It's a privilege to visit these places, and we felt that it's important for us to give back to that global fight against climate change. And when we were in Antarctica, we collected meteorological data across a whole transect of the continent of Antarctica, which is a very unique data set that we were able to give to scientists at the Australian Antarctic Division, to allow them to calibrate and further refine their climate models, and just to do our small part for helping in that fight against climate change. And that's a fight that a contribution to our fight against climate change that we want to continue on further expeditions.
So our next expedition is to Patagonia, and we're really looking forward to sharing that with you here now. So the northern Patagonian ice sheet is the remnants of the ice age in South America. It's a huge 4,500 square meter ice sheet that sits high in the Andes in South America. Our goal when we travel to the northern Patagonian ice sheet is to be part of the GAPS 2025 project, and what that is it's the Global Atmospheric Plastics Survey, and essentially we'll be taking samples of the snow to analyze the content of the snow for micro and nanoplastics. So a lot is known about plastic circulating in the world's oceans, but very little is known about plastic circulating in the atmosphere. And glaciers, being so pristine and remote, are perfect areas to be able to sample the snow to tell us where this atmospheric plastic is coming from and the impact it's having on both ecosystems and human health. So one of the other things that's extremely important about this journey is the fact that not many people, it's incredibly remote, and not many people get up onto the ice sheet. So by taking photographs and film and scientific samples, we can bring up-to-date information about the glaciers and the state of the glaciers at the moment back to scientists around the world. But also, by hopefully making a film of our journey, we'll be able to bring the Patagonian ice sheet into the homes of people around the world. And if people see it and understand it, it's only then that people will begin to think about conserving these amazing areas. So what are we going to do? It's going to be an incredible adventure full of horse riding and alpine climbing and skiing and pack rafting, and it's just an incredible adventure. So we're going to start on the shores of a lake. We're going to load all our gear onto some horses, which we're going to ride up this river valley to the right of the screen to the base of a glacier called the Neff Glacier. At which point we'll take all our gear and load it on the back of our sleds and put our skis on and start the traverse of the ice sheet. And on each of these maps, you'll see a little red dot. And at each of those dots, they're going to be our sample sites. So our first sample will be from the Neff Glacier, and then we'll head up to the northern part of the ice sheet and take samples from the San Rafael Glacier, and then down. We'll make our way down through the middle of the northern ice sheet, dragging all our stuff behind us on sleds. And the journey will take about a month, and it'll be unsupported, so just Rich and I, just straight down the middle of the ice sheet there. And then carry on further down, and in total we'll sample 6 of the largest glaciers in this area. And then once we're at the end of the expedition, we'll find a way off the ice sheet. We'll inflate our pack rafts that we will have carried with us, and we'll paddle out a river for 20 kilometers and then get picked up by a boat. And we're really excited about visiting this incredible place and bringing back some of this really important scientific data.
And we would always encourage you as scouts to get out there into the wild parts of the world. Scouting is an amazing organization that allows you to develop these skills that you're going to use in later life to do all sorts of incredible things, including going on expeditions like we've been privileged to do. Planning for these expeditions, getting the skills that you need, putting in place the logistics to get you, your food, your equipment, and your team all to these remote parts of the world is a big enterprise, requires a lot of planning ahead and a lot of preparation and years of practice and skills. But Scouts puts you in a fantastic place to start to develop those skills. There are also some things like the Leadership Through Adventure Fund, which you can apply for as Scouts to give you grants to go out into these places, because fundraising for these big expeditions is always a challenge as well. So you're perfectly placed to get out there and do these things for yourself, to experience these amazing environments, and also hopefully to gather some scientific data and help us all in our fight against climate change. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that. That was really informative, and I'm sure that we all learned a lot. I'm very excited to hear about your upcoming GAPS 25 expedition when it happens, so hopefully you can report back to us on that one. And would you guys mind sticking around? We might have some questions for you later in the night.
No worries.
Of course.
We'll see you soon.
Thank you. Now we're going to talk to Oliver from Cherrybrook Scout Group in New South Wales, and he's planning an expedition with 5 other Venturer Scouts for 2026 to Patagonia as well. The journey is made possible thanks to the Dick and Pip Smith Leadership Through Adventure Fund, which was just mentioned before. Welcome, Oliver.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I mean, for me, definitely Patagonia has always been a long-term, dream destination. But it's one of those places where it's always been kind of unattainable to get to just because it's sheer distance and price. So I honestly cannot thank the Leadership Through Adventure Fund enough for that one. It's been so amazing. So what we're planning to do is to hike the O-Trek, which is also known as the Torres Del Paine Loop. So it follows the route of the famous W Trek and then pushes out south towards the Patagonian ice fields. And it gets right up to the Torres Glacier and its mountains, which you probably recognize from the Patagonia clothing brand's logo. So I think what we're definitely most excited for is just to be able to immerse ourselves in, a completely different culture and continent, but mainly to be able to see those breathtaking views and that unique scenery that you really just cannot see anywhere else in the world. It would be a great experience for us in terms of, hiking through challenging terrain. But I think definitely the best learning experiences will be able to just experiencing such a unique culture and the different sorts of people that hike the O-Trek, ranging from people like us to, I've heard people bring babies, teenagers, old people, any sort of person you can imagine doing it. And obviously this is something that isn't cheap. And as I said, we would never be able to do if it wasn't for the assistance from the fund. And I'm sure there's plenty of scouts out there that have, dreams for massive ideas like this one. And, we thought about this one for years and kind of always just put it off. But this is an amazing opportunity. And I think, you'd be silly not to go for it, and it might just end up happening.
That sounds so exciting, and what an adventure for you and your patrol. We'd love to have you back later in the evening as well to answer some more questions, if that's okay. Everyone, if you have any questions for Oliver, please put them in the chat. We'll get to you and answer them later in the night. After learning about the importance of glaciers and their impact on our environment and future, it's clear that we all have a role to play in protecting our planet. To learn about how Scouts can take action, I'd like to welcome Patrick and Callista from our Sustainable Development Goals team to chat with us about the Scouts SDG challenges. Hi guys, can you tell us a bit more about the Scouts SDG challenges? Who can be involved and what can Scouts get out of it?
We'd love to. Thanks very much for that, Laura. Hi, I'm Pat. I'm a rover advisor in Victoria, and I'm part of the SDG Challenge team. I'm joining you from Wurundjeri Woiwurrung country today and pay my respect to the elders past and present. So we're going to show you the flow of what we're going to be talking through tonight. We will be keeping it pretty casual and brief, and we welcome any questions you've got. But to kick it off, I'm actually going to hand over to Callista, and Callista's going to tell us more about the SDGs.
Hi, I'm Callista. I'm a rover advisor from the ACT on Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, and I'm the co-lead of the SDG Challenge team. So for our history on the Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs as we generally refer to them, we have to go all the way back to the year 2000, a time where all bar the oldest rovers who are watching were not yet born. And it was on everyone's mind that we're approaching a new millennium, and that this was a great opportunity for humanity as a whole to take stock of where we were. So this is something that the UN took on. And the outcome of the assessment was we weren't really where we were hoping to be at. And so an outcome of this was that the UN Millennium Development Goals, the UN Millennium Development Goals were created. And these 8 goals were launched and agreed upon by the UN members. And they had very focused aims, as you can see, they're up on the screen. Whilst there were worldwide goals, there was really a focus on developed nations supporting the goals by sending money to developing nations instead of taking a holistic approach. So at the end of the Millennium Development Goals in 2015, the UN needed a new approach and new goals. So they tried a new approach, which was to ask the youth what affects them, what concerns them most about their future, and to put that into goals. And they did this through the My World survey. Scouts was a global partner of this and included visiting remote villages to get thoughts so that this wasn't just restricted to those with internet access, but it really was a holistic approach. So this was then taken all together and led to the 17 Sustainable Development Goals, which have 169 subtargets. You can group them in different ways, like social, economic, and environment, or people and planet, or like this, showing how our economic systems exist inside of our society, and that this in turn is just one system inside of our biosphere, life on planet Earth, and including glaciers. So these 17 goals were adopted by the UN in 2015, and in 2017, World Scouting became a key global partner and started actively integrating the SDGs across organizations across the world. One of the ways that they did this was to embed the SDGs into the Better World framework. This has been around for a few years now and is bringing together youth programs designed by World Scouting and is mapped to the SDGs, allowing youth members and supporters to see how the actions they take connect to the goals. And on to you, Pat.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Callista. So where does Scouts fit into this? Well, Scouts started the Scouts for SDGs as the world's largest coordinated youth activation. It involves over 50 million young people and 2 million local actions related to those 17 goals. And we're hoping to deliver an additional 3 billion hours of community service for the SDGs. We've already reached at least 2.7 billion, so a little way to go. You can see here some of the resources that have been developed. So as part of the journey of developing the SDGs, Scouts were involved, and now our chance is to start taking action and champion them. WASM launched the Scouts for SDGs movement to build greater awareness of the SDGs and drive action. And we developed our own hub where you can go online on the Scouts Australia website and learn more, see what you can do and see what others have already done. As part of that, we also developed the SDG Challenge. We wanted to build more awareness across Scouts Australia, and we realised that we needed to enhance that through a new part of our program to help deliver it. The SDG Challenge aims to build our members' awareness of the SDGs and encourage them to work together on project patrols. So, the main parts of the SDG Challenge are to gain awareness, so helping within your unit to build awareness for the SDGs and what they do, to then take action. So choose a few SDGs and work together in your patrol to then deliver some actions to help inspire action towards the goal, and then inspire others. So reach out to your community, reach out to your units and share with them about the SDGs, the action you're taking, and hopefully inspire them to take action too. You can see on this next slide here, there's a badge that we've developed. So as part of the SDGs, there's a nice pink edged badge which youth members can earn as part of the youth program when they complete an SDG challenge. And there's even a woggle. So leaders can do the SDG challenge as well. And you can earn a woggle which you can wear on your uniform. As part of participating, as we said, you're going to educate yourself on the SDGs as well as the community and hopefully build towards lasting change. So, requirements for the SDG challenge, at least 10 hours for Joeys and Cubs towards the challenge, but 20 hours for Scouts and above towards their challenge each year. Through it, you'll learn about the 17 SDGs, and hopefully you're going to choose at least one for the junior sections or at least two for the older sections when you work on your challenge. It is an additional award, so there's more information on Scouts terrain on how you can work towards it. But we do hope that you go online to the sdgs.scout.org website as well to make sure you can log those hours to count towards Scouts' global efforts for the SDGs. We heard tonight all about glaciers. Clearly, there's some huge connections to the SDGs through SDG 13, Climate Action, SDG 14, Life Below Water, and SDG 15, Life on Land. We hope that you are inspired by Dr. Gareth and Dr. Richard's presentation and you find ways to take actions on the SDGs yourself. Thanks very much for that. I'll hand back over to you, Laura.
Thank you so much, Patrick and Callista. That was so informative. I know personally I really want to have a chat with my unit about how we can incorporate this more into our planning and get some of this done, get those hours up to 3 billion. I'd now like to welcome back all of our presenters from tonight to answer some questions. I've got one of my own that I wanted to ask. So for Dr. Gareth and Dr. Richard, how do you guys prepare physically and mentally for your polar expeditions?
That's it's a great question. I mean, I think overall, it was probably about 3 to 4 years of preparation for our big Antarctica trip. In terms of the physical, which a lot of which was logistics and fundraising, but for the last year or so, the physical training was a very big feature. A lot of strength and conditioning work, making ourselves strong and fit and flexible, as well as just the pure fitness and the practice at dragging sleds for huge distances, which we spent a lot of time dragging tires along beaches and getting some very strange looks from our local community. But it's a pretty good way of replicating activity that you have to do over and over again for weeks at a time in Antarctica. But a lot of it is just about making sure that you're tough and strong enough to sustain the level of exercise and the hammering that your body takes day after day, because a lot of expedition fitness isn't about running up a hill as fast as you possibly can. It's about getting up and doing it again day after day after day, never giving in and making sure that your body can stand up to it. Psychologically is a much harder part of it, I think, and certainly I found the psychological aspect when we were out on the ice by far the hardest component of it. I don't know if Gareth's got any pearls about psychological preparation, but it's certainly something that I found very difficult.
I agree entirely with Rich. These expeditions, especially the Antarctic expeditions, 80% mental, 20% physical. It's all about your mental headspace. I think Rich and I, over the years, there's no golden rule to how to prepare mentally for these journeys. I think Rich and I have both prepared by just being on expeditions and being in those hard circumstances, and over time you develop your own strategies to deal with the psychological side of things. And also, it's picking who you go with. Picking your teammates is so incredibly important. Rich and I go on these expeditions together because we know each other extremely well. We complement each other in terms of our skill sets. And we work very well together as a team in terms of the way we approach difficult situations and risk. And so I think we're both a huge psychological help for each other in those difficult times.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah, it clearly takes a lot of preparation for these trips. And I might also put it on to Ollie with your upcoming trip to Patagonia. What sort of preparation are you guys doing? Are there training hikes or stuff like that you're planning?
We've been doing quite a few. Well, we've kind of just been hiking together for a long time. We actually just finished up in northern New South Wales, the Green Gully track, which was beautiful. It was 5 days just through like the northern tablelands, but it was very hot. It was 40 degrees every day. So quite a bit warmer than Patagonia is going to be, but it was good. We good practice for the elevations, definitely. I think we had a few days, some of them got almost up to 1,000 meters in elevation in one day. Yeah, I think definitely just keeping fit regularly, I think, is a really important thing, and just making sure you know your gear. And I think a big thing for us as well has been like weight with equipment has been a big thing, and managing your packs to pack everything you need, but obviously not be killing your shoulders the whole time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's such a physical thing, and it's something that we don't do every day. So getting your fitness up while hiking, it's a different type of exercise, and yeah, I just think that's a really big thing. Scout from WA would like to know, how do you navigate and stay safe in the polar regions?
So primarily, we would use a GPS to decide on our route and our bearing for the day. But then for the majority of the time, when we're out on our skis, we're just navigating via a compass. Often when you're out, for example, in Greenland or Antarctica, when you're out on these huge ice sheets, there's no point of reference. It's like being out on the ocean. There's nothing. There's no mountains. There's no trees to take bearings from. So you spend, if you're breaking trail and out in front navigating, you spend almost all day staring at your compass. You can, when the weather's right and the clouds are in the right spots, you can navigate using the sun, which is always a really nice thing. But on the whole, we would use the GPS to pinpoint our exact positioning, and then a compass for the majority of our navigation.
That sounds quite similar to what some people do in the alpine regions here. I know personally I've been to the rover chalets, which you can go as a venturer or a rover to. And with that, you can do some navigation in the polar region or in the alpine regions in Australia using your compasses, using GPSs, maps. And it's very different trying to navigate over white, snowy terrain as well, even harder when it's flat in the polar regions. So yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you, guys. Another question. What type of data can Scouts collect in alpine regions in Australia? This might also link to the SDGs, I'm not too sure. But is there some things that people can look at that might be helpful? Or see, you guys have sort of found that finding data while you're on these fun activities, doing very adventurous stuff, you can sort of link that back and give it to people. Is there much that we can do as Scouts?
I can take a question on that if you like on data, unless one of Dr. Gareth or Dr. Richard wants to.
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, go for it.
We've heard the really high level stuff. We can collect a whole lot of glacier data, which may go towards climate change information over time. You can do things locally. If you find there's a creek behind your hall, you might be able to join a program like Water Watch, where you can get involved in long-term monitoring of water quality within your waterway, or Estuary Watch, where you're doing the same for estuaries near your house. Maybe getting involved with the local bush care group and just keeping an eye on what species are in an area, maybe even introduce species and keeping an eye on that. So those small scale kind of environmental data monitoring things that you can do. I work in government. I know that we use that kind of data to inform our policy decisions and the health of local areas. So that local citizen science data collection can do a big change, all the way through to the exciting stuff that we've heard tonight, the data that you can collect towards really important scientific data sets.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yeah, there's always so much information available for people to try and gather. So yeah, knowing about them and then also how they can link to the policies and the changes that our governments and councils are making. You can really make a difference from home. This one could either be for Ollie or for Dr. Gareth or Dr. Richard. Just about some polar specific gear. Are there things for Patagonia that you don't really use in Australia that you're going to need there, and what's maybe some of your most interesting pieces?
I actually wanted to ask you guys that one as well.
What do you think, Rich?
I think one of the most unique things, I mean, I guess you could say, maybe our skis or the ski setup we use isn't dissimilar to what you might use around Kosciuszko in Australia. I guess probably the two most unique bits of kit. One is the sleds that we pull behind us. That's something that's really unique about the way that you travel in these polar environments. Because you're going on such long expeditions, our Antarctic trip was 66 days long. We had 165 kilograms of gear each at the start of that expedition. And obviously that's far more than you could even lift, never mind carry on your back in a rucksack. And so in the polar regions, because you're traveling over this smooth, flat surface, well, reasonably smooth and flat surface, you pull it all behind you in a sled over the snow and the ice behind you. And those sleds themselves are fascinating bits of kit. They're made out of special materials to be extra slippery and super light and super strong. And how you attach them to yourself with the ropes, the traces, and the harness that you wear to pull all that weight along is something that's really unique about polar travel. And then, of course, the polar ruff, the fur that you wear around your hood, that is something else that you don't really see in any other environment. You don't really see it in alpine environments. It's something that's particular to polar regions, and it's something that all those photographs of the famous polar explorers will always have a big fur ruff around their faces, and that's really just nature has done it for us, and as the way that hair and fur work is to trap pockets of air next to the body that don't move and are able to be warmed and create these pockets of warm air. And it's the same principle around your face, because there's such high risk of getting frostbite to things like your nose and your lips and your cheeks, that creating a microclimate around your face of warm air by adapting the animal world way of doing it with this fur ruff is something that works incredibly well.
We've got a question down here for Dr. Gareth and Dr. Richard. Neville saying, congratulations on your terrific presentation. What do you see as the greatest challenge for your GAPS 25 expedition? What would be the best advice you could offer the first Cherrybook unit as they start planning for their Patagonia expedition?
Thank you very much, Neville, for your question.
Hi, Neville.
Look, our Patagonia expedition is going to be full of huge challenges, and I think that's what we're most excited about. The biggest challenge, I think, for us is going to be the Patagonian weather. It's notorious as a place, as a home of the tempest, basically. Because South America and Patagonia come down into a peninsula, it gets smashed by the weather systems from two huge ocean systems, and then from Antarctica coming up from the south. And because there's not much land mass to mitigate or to take the energy out of the wind, it just hammers Patagonia really hard. So we're gearing up for some long days stuck in tents. We're brushing up on our skills and how to build snow caves to shelter from these huge winds and snowstorms. So I think that's going to be the biggest challenge. I'd love to hear Rich's advice. My advice for the guys from Cherrybrook and Ollie is that, and I'm so excited for you guys. I think you're going to have the most amazing time. It would be to make sure that you have lots of dry bags and you put all your kit in dry bags, basically, and be ready for anything. Be ready for anything.
Yeah, definitely. One thing I actually wanted to ask you guys is, how do you deal with the language barrier and sort of doing, these big expeditions, not being able to speak the local language?
Well, Gareth cheats because Gareth has married a Chilean, so he just asked his wife to speak in Spanish to them.
I can't do that one, unfortunately.
Yeah, if I'm honest, I think we're pretty lucky. A lot of our expeditions have been to places, sort of the Scandinavian world, where everybody speaks English, and Antarctica is, there's no native peoples of Antarctica, and so if I'm brutally honest, I get around it by speaking my English more slowly. I haven't got any great pearls of wisdom in that space.
Fair enough.
I guess it'll be a challenge for both of you guys then with your travels. You'll both be sort of trying to work on that one. I've got a question for the SDG team. What are some badge work ideas that people can get related to, climate change and preserving our environment?
So you can obviously get the SCG Challenge badge, but you can bring this it's embedded within our Peak Awards. So you could do this as a special interest area. You can do a particular project if you find something that you're interested in. I know a venturer who's really interested. They live near a creek and they use the Frog ID app, and they're just there recording Frog ID, frog calls, and going through and helping scientists go through and categorize what's actually living in that creek so that they can build a really comprehensive map that's coming in with these frog calls all across Australia. So it's only limited by what your imagination is and what you're interested in. If you're unsure, it's worth talking to other people or looking at the SDGs Scouts for SDGs page. Also having a look at some of those citizen science projects that might be able to inspire you and think about things in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. If you can bring your own interests into it as well, it's a great way to pair it.
Yeah.
We've got another question for Gareth and Richard. What kind of food would you take in your packs? Is it something like the army ration packs? Do you guys use dehydrated food or freeze-dried or local produce? What do you guys do for your food?
So on long unsupported journeys like this, the bulk of the weight that you take is your food. So we will take freeze-dried or dehydrated food as the bulk of our meals. We sometimes make our own muesli fortified with milk powder and protein powder that we have in the mornings as a really good boost. But our main meals will be freeze-dried, and then during the day, just snacks, trail mix, chocolate, energy bars, those sorts of things.
And I would say that it's a great question, and food is incredibly important. The fact that we had really good food with us, both from a tastiness point of view, from a calorie consumption point of view, and also from a micronutrients, vitamins, minerals point of view, was integral to us completing our Antarctic expedition without major injuries or upsets. And so for anybody going on expeditions, whether it's like yours, Ollie, the food that you take is vitally important. And Gareth and I have, our trip across Iceland was interesting in terms of the amount of food we took, and we certainly underestimated how much we needed, and it got pretty tough in the middle, and we got pretty skinny and pretty battered by the time we finished. And if in doubt, take more food, because you're going to eat a lot.
It was interesting that you mentioned like an area where potentially you had a bit of a downfall you didn't plan for enough. Do you have any other unexpected challenges that you've had that you have to try and manage in the moment, or like potential risks that maybe could come up and how you plan for those?
There was one of the most dangerous things anybody will encounter, and I suspect this goes for Australia as well as a lot of the parts of the world that we've traveled through, is watching out for your rivers. Rivers are dangerous things. River crossings present by far the highest risk part of any expedition, and it's no different in a lot of the parts of the world that we've traveled in. And certainly, I think I suspect Gareth agree, but trying to cross a couple of rivers in Iceland was extremely hairy, and it's definitely the closest we've come to disaster. And some of that was that we were traversing pretty wild, unknown terrain, and we didn't really have much of a choice. But making sure that you factor things like that in, staying safe around rivers and never underestimating the power of them when you're trying to cross them, would certainly be a top tip from me.
Beautiful.
Yeah, and a lot of what we do before we go on these expeditions is the groundwork and the planning. For example, with these rivers in Iceland, we looked at Google Earth images and we GPS marked all the sections that we thought might be waterfalls or rivers, because this is a river no one really knows much about. In Antarctica, we looked at ground penetrating radar to pick out crevasse fields so we could navigate safely through crevasses and those sorts of things. So the importance of planning is absolutely paramount.
Yeah. No, it's especially when you're navigating territory that hasn't really been touched before. It's interesting that you guys use those tools to help you find those potential risks. We might have our last question for the night for the SDG team. What about some local climate actions that Scouts can take?
Yeah, for sure. Happy to chat about that, Laura. There are so many ways you can take climate action. There are simple things around the hall, like you can look at your energy efficiency or whether you've got solar panels or other forms of renewable energy already in place and explore those. There are so many grants available to help tackle those things. But we're in the midst of a federal election soon, so now's the time to even learn about climate policy. For some of the older sections, maybe you could learn about the different parties' climate policies. And politicians and candidates, this is the right time for be able to chat to them. They've got heaps of ideas. They want to represent your local community, so talk to them about climate policies. Ask them what they think, why they think certain positions, and what they want to take forward for the people. So it's a really great way to get engaged in a non-political sense, because you're just engaging with all different parties on their political positions, but it will really help educate you on climate action and maybe even find additional ways that you can take action locally as well.
Yeah, amazing. Thanks for that. A huge thank you to all of our presenters tonight. We've learned so much and heard some truly inspiring stories and some incredible adventures. That's it from us for now, but the adventure doesn't end here. If you want to keep up with Dr. Gareth and Dr. Richard, if you've got a big idea for an epic adventure and want to see how the Dick and Pip Smith Leadership Through Adventure Fund could support you, or if you're ready to take on an SDG challenge, head to scouts.com.au or follow Scouts Australia on Facebook and Instagram for more inspo and information. Thanks for being here tonight, and we'll see you next time.